NZ Aerosports, Icarus Canopies, now Gyro. That's right, we've rebranded, and Gyro is our next generation. It honours our founder, as that's the name we knew him by, but Gyro also marks the start of a new chapter. And not to be biased, but it's going to be fucking epic. Long story short, we're more us than ever, so if you're new to the sport, or even a Sky God Ninja Turtle, welcome. I think our valiant leader Lucy, Gyro's daughter, says it best.
And we still got that fuck yeah attitude. Rebrand! Woo!
Rebrand woo indeed, Lucy. Anyway, head over to gyro.com for more info and get amongst your legends.
I was 19, broke, unemployed, and sold my girlfriend's canopy for drug money. So I thought I better sew her a new one. What a sentence, and what a story. This describes the humble yet outrageous beginnings of NZ Aerosports, the home of Icarus Canopies, in the words of our founder himself. From getting a paratrooper toy from his mom, watching parachutes at the DZ as a 6-year-old, jumping off the wharf with a parachute made from bed sheets, doing his first jump at 16, sewing his first canopy on a borrowed machine at 19, and starting to sell parachutes out of a garage in 1986, Paul Gyro Martin had an undying love for the sky. Our company started with one man with the wildest of spirits and a true blue sky dream, a renegade. In the time that Gyro created and ran the Icarus Canopies brand until he passed away in 2017, he pushed everything he had to its limits. We miss him, and we always will. Gyro is the next generation of NZ Aerosports. It honors our founder, of course, because it was the name we all knew him by, but Gyro the rebrand also marks the start of a new chapter, our next jump. Gyro is the space between sound and silence, art and science, chaos and calm. Gyro is a state of epic tranquility that transcends understanding. That moment, in the door, in free fall, mid-swoop, where nothing but the present exists. A perfect balance of euphoria and thrill. Gyro captures our passion for flying and our commitment to designing break-the-fucking-rules canopies that deliver pilots pure, wild flight.
Coming straight from the cockpit, it's another episode of Lunatic Fringe with the fucking pilot.
Ready, set, go. All right, once again, this is the fucking pilot in the can with another edition of Lunatic Fringe Into the Void. And this one, for me especially, is a very special edition of the podcast. I got somebody I've been wanting to pick his brain for more years than I can count. So tell me, who the fuck are you and what do you do?
My name is Ray Ferrell, and I'm a recovering DZO.
Oh my God, Ray fucking Ferrell. Oh my God. Do you have any idea how many people right now are just sitting at the edge of their seats right now?
Yeah. Some may be interested, some may be pissed off.
Yeah. Hey, that means we did it right?
Yeah.
So recovering DZO, you're officially retired. You don't run a drop zone anymore.
Nope, I got out of it in 2017, January 2017. I sold the business, and I've moved to the Florida Keys, where I'm enjoying life, doing a lot of scuba diving, still actively skydiving, and staying busy. I'm semi-retired, I should say, because I have 5 turboprop airplanes that we still lease out for skydiving.
Of course.
So that keeps us a little bit busy.
Yeah, man, I bet it does. So that's, well, actually, before we get way ahead of ourselves, let's back up a little bit. So you've been in skydiving for a long damn time. Ray Ferrell was a very common name when I started, at least on the West Coast. But how did your skydiving career start? Where'd you begin? Where was that first jump, and why did you make that first jump?
My first skydive was in 1976 in North Carolina, Lewisburg, North Carolina. Franklin County Sport Parachute Center, which was Paul Fayer's place. And I'd always been infatuated with heights. I always thought jumping out of an airplane would be a cool thing to do once in your life. And but before I started skydiving, I was down at Jockey's Ridge, North Carolina, where the Wright brothers flew. And driving down the road, I saw a hang glider. And Jockey's Ridge is a 13-story high sand dune, probably the safest place in the world to try to fly. And that's where the Wright brothers flew, and they were flying hang gliders, and I stopped. They gave introductory lessons, and I took an introductory lesson.
Nice.
Went home and bought a homemade orange tie-dyed sail hang glider, and that's another whole story. It turns out I didn't know what I was doing or buying, and I just went back to Jockey's Ridge like I knew what I was doing, put it together, took off, and started going up and kept going up. Couldn't pull the bar far enough forward to get it to go down. Turns out the hang glider was built for towing.
Oh man.
So I kept going up until I flipped upside down and came crashing back down. Fortunately, I landed on top of another guy's hang glider, which probably saved my life, but it bit the shit out of his hang glider. So
yeah.
So I had to pay for the damage and put my tail between my legs and go back home.
That's a hell of a way to start your aviation career.
It was my aviation career. So I bought a set of plans and took this thing apart and started all over and built a new one. And I was in the hang gliding for several years before I made my first skydive. And same old story everybody tells you probably. I had a bunch of friends I'd gotten together, so we were going to go make a jump because if you had 6 or more, you got a discount. Took 6 months to put it together. The day we were supposed to go, every one of them had a reason not to go. So I went by myself and went to the training. It was windy. It was March in North Carolina. It was windy season. Had to go back 3 weeks in a row before I finally got to make my first jump. And as soon as I made the first jump, I landed, bought the student package, and never stopped.
Wow. Now that was all. I'm assuming that was all static line.
Oh yeah, static line, military surplus gear. It was back in the day when the worst gear on the drop zone was the student gear. Yeah.
Well, what was the old T-shirt that was around for a while? I remember when sex was safe and skydiving was dangerous.
That's right. Yeah,
it was back then.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting, but it was also my first airplane ride. I had never been in an airplane before I made my first skydive.
No shit.
Yeah. So
wow. I think in 20-something years now of flying people and taking jumpers, I think I've had maybe 3 or 4 people that had never been in a plane before they jumped. I mean, how was that? That must have been just bizarre.
Well, I was always infatuated with heights as a kid. I grew up in the country and I spent my childhood swinging through the treetops. Tarzan was my hero. And I was just jazzed. I was so busy wanting to look out the door. I'll never forget the instructor was right in my face talking to me the whole time, and I was just thinking, let me look out of the airplane.
He just wanted to enjoy the view.
Yeah, so when they opened the door, I was pumped up on adrenaline. As soon as they opened the door, I started climbing out, and he grabbed me and says, "Wait a minute, I got a spot."
Oh,
so I was good to go, man. And it was the old military surplus gear, a T-28 and main canopy. And when I got out there on that wing strut, it was all the wind and the speed, and then when I let go and the canopy open. People in these modern skydivers don't know this feeling, but when you're hanging in the air under a big round canopy, it is the most quiet, peaceful thing on earth.
I bet.
No speed. It's amazing. And so my jump was right at sunset. I went back during the week to finally get a day that was not windy. My jump was right at sunset, and there was a full moon on one side of the sky and a sun setting on the other side of the sky. And I thought I was in the middle of heaven. It was just incredible.
That's kind of the recipe to grab somebody by the balls for sure. I mean, you're kind of stuck at that point.
Yep. It was pretty amazing. So, like I said, I hit the ground, went up, paid for the package, and the adventure began.
So now when you were doing this, how old were you when you made that first jump?
I think I was 23. I think 23 years old.
All right. So, were you in school at the time? Were you with family? Were you on your own doing your own thing? I mean, was this
No, I left home when I was 16 and floundered around trying to figure out what to do myself. I was in my third year of college. I had taken it. Well, I did one semester my third year, I think it was, and then I had been working and going to school since I was 16, and I decided I was going to stop college, work full time for a year or two, save up my money, and go back to school and finish. And I started skydiving instead.
Then you made that fucking jump, yeah. Well, before you made that jump, what were you going to be when you grew up?
I was an engineering student.
Okay.
And so I was a civil engineering student, and I had done a lot of work in the construction trade, and I had all kinds of little side businesses. I used to do custom van interiors. I had a little tiny contracting company that we built billboard signs, which I kind of hated because I thought they were ugly as hell. But,
sure.
Well, I did a lot of things like that.
Your engineering would have served you well as you got older too, and we'll definitely get into that because I know personally how much you put that engineering knowledge to use later in life, for sure.
I like to say I became a parachute engineer.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, speaking of, so you make your first jump and you decide, fuck it, that's it, and now the college money you're saving ends up going into nylon and jump tickets. When did you start? Obviously, you went full bore right from then, but how did you start working in the sport? What was the first gig in skydiving for you?
Well, I was in Franklin County. I met was at the time was the kind of the most RW progressive skydiving center on the East Coast.
Okay.
Polk Valley on the West Coast, and Franklin County had a lot going on. The Wallace brothers was called the Dirt Divers, and they all worked at a company called Steinthal Parachute Company in Roxborough, North Carolina.
Okay.
And a group of those guys, they were called the Roxborough 8. All of those guys, it was the management team, were moving to California because Security Parachute Company had been bought out by GQ Parachutes of England.
Okay.
And so the management team was going out to California. That included the Dave and Bungie Wallace and several other guys. And they suggested I come with them, and I said I had never been west of the Mississippi, and I said, "You guys are crazy. California is full of it's going to fall in the ocean, and it's full of crazy people and nuts." And throughout that summer, they kept egging me on. They were leaving later, throughout that winter, and so in April of 1978, I decided what the hell. So I had a yard sale, sold everything I had except for a motorcycle and a chest of drawers full of all the clothes I had. We got a 24-foot U-Haul truck, and Bungie Wallace and I drove across country.
Oh man!
To go to work, and I went to work for this parachute company for $100 a week before taxes.
Holy Jesus Christ! So you were at the time the epitome of a country boy. Never been, never been in an airplane before. Never been west of the Mississippi before. I'm guessing that accent of yours was a shitload thicker back then.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And you hopped into a U-Haul and drove to fucking California for $100 a week.
Yep. Well, I didn't have a job when I left. The parachute company decided to hire me once I got there, and but like I said, I had an engineering background and a drafting background, so. But I did it because I wanted to learn everything I could learn about the skydiving business or the equipment.
Sure.
And so it worked out really well because I worked with a guy named Dick Warren, who was the parachute doctor, and he was originally from Steinthal as well. He was an older gentleman, but a super guy and smart as hell. And he was actually contracted by Paraflight back in the day when Paraflight first started building ram air canopies, because every ram air canopy that was built had built-in turns.
Really?
And and he's the one that figured out why that was happening. And I don't want to get into too much boring details, but the bottom line is fabric has a weave, and back in those days they didn't have tolerances over where that weave went. So you would have fabric, and if you look closely at the ripstop fabric, it looked like uh, all the lines were at an angle.
Okay.
So when you put it all together in panels on the canopy, those lines would make it turn into a parallelogram instead of a rectangle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it would turn. So he discovered what was going on, and he would mark the high side of the fabric and flip the fabric back and forth as you put the parachute together. So it made a herringbone weave
Sure.
across the canopy.
Okay, that
and
makes
it made
sense.
the canopy fly straight.
Wow.
So pretty unique stuff. So I learned a lot of stuff there, and I got my rigger's ticket there, and then I got my master parachute rigger's ticket, and I started out in the engineering department. So I was working on both canopy and container designs, and it was a great gig. It was good fun. I wasn't making much money, so at Pope Valley on the weekends, I was a short order cook in the restaurant at Pope Valley Drop Zone.
Oh, wow.
And I worked in the bar on Friday and Saturday night, and I was a short order cook on Saturday and Sunday morning.
I'm really trying to picture that.
And the good news back then, because I was a good old Southern boy, I didn't drink and didn't take recreational stuff.
Sure.
And so all of my money went into skydiving and peanut butter and honey sandwiches.
Man, oh man, that must have been. I suppose maybe because of the Southern upbringing and such. But I can't imagine being in California in the mid '70s when the hippies are it's just starting to fade out. The '60s is just over. That place must have been crazy.
Oh, it was. It was definitely crazy. But I mean, I didn't grow up too much as a church boy. I mean, I hung out with the typical rabble-rouse of school.
Sure.
And so, although I didn't drink or do drugs, I certainly was amongst it.
So
to the point, my friends really enjoyed me being around because they knew they could trust me.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. But of course, skydivers changed everything and started drinking.
Right? Yeah, that does happen, doesn't it? They fucking did that to me as well because I never drank either until I ended up out in Cross Keys and ended up jumping with a bunch of Brits that were offended that I wouldn't drink with them, and now I can drink with the best of them, bastards.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's quite a big deal to trek all the way across the United States for an unknown, especially when you just got started in the sport, but to find your feet in that way and to start learning that early on must have been super cool, especially looking back at it.
Yeah, Pope Valley was an amazing place. It was definitely the mecca of leading technology, leading edge skydiving going on at the time. I got there, I had 140 jumps. I thought I'd never get on a load again because I was amongst sky gods.
Sure.
And there was a fellow named Scratch Garrison who is an icon in the sport from back those days as well. And he was doing three-dimensional skydives before anybody even knew what the word free fly was. This was in the 70s.
Right.
And he was doing all kinds of permutation skydives and where it was constant flow moving through formations and just an amazing stuff. So I started making a lot of skydives with him and his great group of people, and it was learning and fast forward. It was really amazing.
Oh, which is fantastic.
So it was, and this was the early days of ram air canopies, and so I came up in an era of skydiving which was really moving from the old military style and accuracy discipline to the RW.
Sure.
And formation skydiving, or RW, was the hippies of the skydiving community. And and it was a great place to be at that time, for sure.
For sure. Well, it's funny too because I know a few of the older jumpers that I'm good friends with have similar stories, and they started on the rounds and transitioned into the ram air stuff. But did you ever think back then that it would end up where it is now?
Not really, but on the other hand, one of the most amazing things about skydiving, which I've always said, is that, I mean, I've done a lot of sports and a lot of things, and with hang gliding, for example, in the early days, there was a lot of people we used to call sled riders, and they would have the fanciest, nicest equipment, They'd be on the top of the hill. They'd wait till the end of the day when it was nice and calm winds, and they'd launch and slide down the hill. But they looked good,
Great.
And with skydiving, you can have the best gear in the world and look good going to the airplane, but there's no bullshitting your way out of it when you're in the doorway.
No, there isn't. That was was kind of one of the cool things about when I came up in skydiving, and you'll remember this as well because you were in the thick of things, is that at one point, I think it was in the mid-'90s and early 2000s, you knew it was a good skydiver. The grungier his rig was and the nastier his jumpsuit was, chances were the better the skydiver was.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't bullshit your way through skydiving. But the great thing about skydiving is that it's constantly evolving. You can be, and like for days, wind tunnels have made huge advances in free flying and skydiving. Period. It's amazing. So you can get as good as you can possibly be on your belly. You can flip upside down and start over.
Yep.
And I always said, it really sucks to have 6,000 skydives and be a neophyte.
Right.
Which is what I am when I try to get on my back and stay there.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. It's the same thing with me. I just I rolled through 11,000 jumps, and I've got people with a couple hundred jumps that can outfly me without even thinking about it because they've got a shitload of time in the tunnel.
Yeah. So that's what's great about it, and certainly the parachute equipment has advanced to the point where, we're always going to find a way to kill ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Because parachute gear is so reliable now. And so to answer your question, I'm not totally surprised because the evolution of skydiving continues to blow me away.
Sure.
With new stuff.
I guess for me, I'm not shocked at the evolution of the flying nearly as much as I am the technology with the equipment, because I really don't have a background in that like you do. But I remember when stilettos came out, everybody thought there's no way there will ever be a better wing than this canopy. And that was when, you had to supposedly prove you had 500 jumps to even be able to buy one of these things. And it was the most badass canopy ever. And now students are practically jumping stilettos.
Well, yeah, and it's the same thing when I had been flying hang gliders, and then I'm going through my student training with these big old fat round canopies and the worst gear in the world, and I'm watching these guys with new ram airs coming in and doing stand-up landings, and I go, that flies like a hang glider. That's what I got to have.
Right.
And back then, they said you got to have 200 jumps before you can buy a ram air canopy or jump a ram air canopy. So I said, the hell with that, and I went and found myself a used parasled. So anybody, you guys out there that don't know anything about parasleds, it's an amazing canopy. It was it had a split tail, so it was like wing warping. And anyway, that was my first ram air canopy. And then when I was working at Security Parachute Company, we came out with a unit which was the first lightweight 7-cell canopy, and then we came out with the X210, which was 210 square foot lightweight 7-cell canopy, and everybody said that canopy is too fast, it's too dangerous, you guys can't sell that.
Could you imagine if they were able to, if you had a time machine and you could just go back on a Saturday to any one of these drop zones with a Leia or a Velocity or a Petra? My God.
Yeah. But the transition time, probably if the canopies that are available today were available when I was 20, I might not be here today.
Yeah.
Because, I spent a great part of my time at Security Parachute Company in the engineering department and also running test programs. So I did a lot of test jumps. And like, for example, with the X210, it was spin faster than anything you'd ever had. And I spun myself into the ground with it, just horsing around too low to the ground.
Oh.
And I came out my last turn and was like, I've just realized I've screwed the pooch. I got an airplane in front of me or a tarmac to hit on, one or the other.
Oh.
So I took the tarmac.
Yeah.
And cracked both of my heels, but I got up and walked away. You can't do that today.
No.
So that's the difference. The gear is so fast and so reliable. and safe if you drive it properly.
Yeah, I mean today it's no longer a matter of the equipment failing; it's the training failing.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
I think that's probably the biggest thing that a lot of people have talked about, and I've had some of the hardcore swoop champions in here to talk to me, and it's all boiled down to training and moving at a safe pace, because at the end of the day, even an extremely accomplished skydiver can go out and kill themselves if they're just a little bit off one day.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or if you have a bad spot and you're in a tight spot, I mean, you don't have a real good way to land.
No. Well, it's like
So,
that. It's like
but-
that
but-
video that came out of the kid that had himself a bad spot over a city and ended up slamming into the side of a house because there was nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Fuck.
yeah, exactly.
What do you do?
So the equipment has come so far so fast, but a lot of times, well, most times, the training has not kept up with the
Yeah.
equipment. The equipment comes first, and then you got to figure out how to stop killing yourself with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and that seems to be the general trend. Although I think this time around with the new wave of canopies, when stuff like the Petra came out, the community had already figured out, all right, these parachutes are going to kill a lot of fucking people if we fly them like the Stiletto. Because when the Stiletto came out in the Batwing, those canopies, the first swoopable canopies came out, nobody really knew what they were getting themselves into,
Right.
So I think now at least the community knows, all right, this wing is even more high performance than what was the end all be all, the Velocity, and now they're on wings that make the Velocity look like a student canopy, and there's just no room for error. So I think the training for once actually kept up with the danger of it.
Well, it's caught up with the danger of it. It didn't keep up with it to start with.
No.
But it's caught up with it, and that's a great thing. And like at Skydance, we tried really hard at my DZ that safety needs to be a part of the culture, not an afterthought.
Yeah.
And so we constantly, as a community, policed ourselves. When we saw someone do something erratic or stupid under canopy, they got canceled.
Sure.
And if they didn't clean their act up, we would condemn them to jumping and landing in the student field until they got their ducks in a row.
Yep.
So yeah, but the community policing works really well also, and it helps reinforce the safety culture of it. Now there's some places obviously that didn't do that.
Sure.
But that's the training has caught up, and the training is really good. In fact, we ran one of the canopy courses by the Flight One group.
Yep.
We ran their canopy courses at our DZ every year for the last several years while I was there, and I'll never forget. I had a guy with 4,000 skydives that took their 101 course.
Yep.
And he told me 4,000 skydives, and I'm finally learning how to fly a canopy.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, but that's how good the training was as well. Those guys do a great job.
Sure. Well, I mean, it needs to be because, you remember when I broke my fucking tailbone, I'd spent maybe 6 months off my canopy because I was too busy flying, and went out and whipped a hook turn like I'd been on it the day before and had lost the feel for the canopy, stalled it out and broke my tailbone. And that was just, that should have been a normal landing. I just lost a feel for it. Well, when you were flying a PD 190, yeah, you can kill yourself on a PD 190, but you're generally not going to lose the feel for it,
Right.
So it's definitely changed, and especially in the way that things were done out in Skydance, it wasn't you got to watch out for that one person that's going to get you in trouble if you do something stupid, because everybody was that person, and that was a really amazing way to be.
Yeah, and it helped. I think it helped a lot. So we wound up with a pretty good. I mean, everybody. Sometimes they didn't appreciate it at the moment they were being talked to, but
no, nobody does.
In the big picture, everybody got it.
Oh,
and,
sure.
So we all looked out for each other, and it worked out really well that way.
So now, speaking of Skydance, how did that come about? Because you end up in Pope Valley, and you're a short order cook and designing and doing test jumps and all that stuff, but you ended up transitioning into owning and operating probably one of the longest lived mid-sized drop zones in the U.S. So how did that start?
Well, we after Pope Valley was sold and got shut down, everybody scattered, and so we were going to different places. I was still working at Security Parachute Company, and then the company that had bought them out, it was GQ of England. They decided to shut down the operation and move all the product they wanted to keep back to their facilities in England. So I was basically, like everybody else at Security Parachute Company, kind of out on the street trying to figure out what to do with myself. So I started Action Air Parachute Company, which was my little parachute loft.
Sure.
And rented a house in Alameda, California. The bottom floor of the house was my loft, and we lived upstairs. And then I was involved in the early days of tandem jumping. In fact, I had the first tandem rig west of the Mississippi. I had the only tandem gear program in California to start with. So from the very beginning, I was involved in it. I was in the first group of people that got their tandem instructor or examiner ratings, and so I was running a tandem program, and I had gone to the only big drop zone in Northern California, which was Lodi at the time, and told Bill I wanted to run a tandem operation there, and he said, okay. So I brought my trailer out, ran my own operation separate from his operation. But I had to pay him for the airplane seats, and he would make me buy the whole 182 load and for one tandem at a time. And in the weekend, I'd pay him off in cash, and that's how we got started.
Wow.
And after a very short time, maybe 2 months, 3 months, he decided that I had offered to train him to do two tandems and would leave my gear there during the week for him to use during the week because I was running a weekend program. And he said, okay. And I said, well, when do you want to do the training? He goes, I'm not going to ride in front of that thing. I said, well, I'm not going to give you a tandem rating then. So he didn't get his tandem rating. So he said we couldn't do tandems anymore. He said he read the waiver. Back then we were under a waiver, for 10 or 15 years under a waiver.
Long time.
FAA. Yeah. So he said he read the waiver and he said you can't charge to do tandems and you can't charge for the airplane ride to do tandems. So you can't do tandems here. And I said, okay. And so I moved my operation to Antioch Parachute Center.
All right.
With the Jones brothers and started doing them there. Well, that wasn't good enough. Bill wrote a letter to the Western region of the FAA and got a legal interpretation from the FAA saying exactly the same thing, that you couldn't charge for tandems and you couldn't charge for airplane ride do tandems because it was experimental. But so that's kind of the same way it is for flying experimental aircraft, like a home-built airplane, like a Pitt Special.
Sure.
Right? You can't charge somebody to fly in a Pitt Special from point A to point B, but you can charge them for aerobatic training.
All right.
So that was the way it was supposed to be with skydiving, but Dawes got a very narrow interpretation of the rule, so we were basically grounded. But I started the Tandem Sport Parachute Jumpers Association. And dedicated to the advancement of skydiving training through tandem parachute jumps.
Nice.
And so I made up a form. It was a beautiful little thing. Back in the day it was. It looks pretty silly now. But anyway, I made up a form. I had the Tandem Sport Parachute Jumpers Association. It cost you, back then, it would cost you $125 to join the association. And as a member of the association, you got to make one free tandem skydive.
It's genius.
So I was only out of business for a day before I was back in business. And then the other thing that I did was I made up a form letter to the FAA, basically so that everybody made a tandem jump. I gave them the letter at the end with their certificate. I said, if you enjoyed this, if you thought it was valuable, please sign this letter and send it to the FAA. and so most of my tandem students wrote their own letters versus signing mine.
Right.
So that summer, the FAA legal office got inundated with letters from my tandem association. So it took about a year before they changed their rules again, so that we could continue doing tandems.
That's fucking great. That's sneaky, but that's great.
Yeah. So in the end, because Dawes couldn't kill it, he had to join it.
Oh.
And that's a whole nother story. And I'd really not spend my whole day talking about Bill Dawes.
Yeah, no. Let's not do that. There's way too many skeletons to unbury with that. Well, so you end up doing all that, but you end up eventually out of Yolo County.
Yeah. So what happened was after I was doing my stuff at Antioch, the Jones brothers saw how well the tandem worked, and they weren't in favor of the tandem program at all at the time. But they saw what I was doing, and they saw how well it was working, and of course they wanted their own tandem program.
Sure.
So it became obvious to me that I needed my own facility if I was going to keep my own tandem program going. And I was good friends with Dan O'Brien, and he was working in the construction trade. He wanted to be in the skydiving world full time. And he was actually working part-time with me in my parachute loft because he was a rigger as well. So we started on a hunt to find a place to run a tandem program. And so I'll make this as fast as I can because it could go on forever.
Sure.
My first wife and I were engaged at the time, and we wound up getting married near Yolo County Airport at a private ranch. And then the ranch was up for sale, and we were going to buy this ranch. It had a 2,500 foot grass strip on it.
Oh wow!
And so that's where we got married, and we had a wedding boogie there. We had two 182s, and it was a hell of a party.
I bet.
At a private ranch. And so we had that in escrow. We were going to buy it. And but at the same time, we had been negotiating with Yolo County for almost 18 months because Yolo County was our backup plan. We were going to buy this private airstrip and run our drop zone there. It had a house, it had barns, it had facilities. It was a beautiful thing. But first time I ever tried to buy any property, I didn't know basically anything about what I was doing.
Sure.
And the week before we were supposed to close in escrow, the bank we were working with came back and said, and this is back in the day when farm values were so depressed you couldn't borrow money for a farm. And it was an 80-acre parcel, and the bank came back to us and said we can only loan money on 5 acres and the improvements of the property, the house, and can't loan money on the property, the rest of the property. So we came up $30,000 short, and back then 30,000 could have been 30 million.
Sure.
I wasn't going to come up with 30,000.
Sure.
So we went to the owners and said, "Hey, you gotta either carry a second on this property or drop the price, or else we can't be bought." Right. And it had been on the block. It had been on the market for a couple of years at that time. So they told us they had a backup offer, and I figured they were jerking my chain. And bottom line is the day we were supposed to close escrow, we couldn't close, and this developer from Santa Rosa bought it out from under us.
Oh wow!
So Plan B became Plan A, and that's how we wound up finally got a lease on the airport at Yolo County Airport. But as we started, Yolo County.
Yeah.
Yolo. You only live once. So we were on Yolo County Airport, but we didn't have permission to land on the airport. And we met a farmer that had property across the street from the airport property. And his name was Dwayne Chamberlain. He's a wonderful guy, and we called him Saint Dwayne. He said he would let us land on his property.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we started a skydiving center in February in the middle of a mud pit because it was rainy season.
Yep.
And we were trucking people back and forth across the road to where the drop zone itself was, the landing area.
Wow.
But Dwayne he is a great guy. He's still around. He said there was all kinds of people in the county that told him he ought not let us land there. And the more people said no, he shouldn't do it, the more he wanted to do it. So he became a real advocate for us.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's how it all got started.
Well, and you went with the idea of a 2,500-foot grass strip and ended up on one of the largest paved runways in Northern California.
Yeah, 5,000 feet.
It's fucking massive runway. That thing is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely enormous. Well, Skydance got to be very, very well known, even though it started out a bit on the rough side, and it ended up with quite a huge base of people that ended up doing everything from jumping there to camping there to living there, and that place got pretty out of control. It was fun.
It was moderately out of control. We tried to keep a thumb on it a little bit.
Well, you said before we got started that the first 10 years were a bit rough, trying to make it all work, and then you kind of had to get down to business. And I didn't come out there until 2004 is when you and I first met.
Right.
So it was already pretty well established and had a great crew of people, and you were running the PAC 750 and all that stuff. And actually, I want to ask you about that as well, because there's more than a few pilots listening. You were instrumental in the start of the PAC 750.
Yeah. We started Skydance in 1987. Dan O'Brien and I did, and so we had, and my job was to run the student training program and the aircraft. And Dan was going to be the general manager. He was an international competitor. I had competed at the Nationals a few times, but he was on part of Mirror Image, which was a world champion 8-way team that won the world championships 3 times. So he was going to be the drop zone manager, and he was going to recruit people to come here to train. And we did a really good job with that. As you probably remember, we had the Olympic skydiving team train at our center for 2 weeks before we went to Korea in 1988 for the Olympics. We had international teams. We had the English team, the Norway team, the Norwegians, the Belgians. It was a great time. We had people from all over the world coming there. We had a group of Indonesians come from your second home to our place for a whole summer. So that was all happening, and the airplane thing was, we were the first people to buy a King Air for skydiving.
Okay.
And was also the first to realize how bad an idea it was. Because, I was a young pilot. At the time, I didn't have a commercial ticket, so I hired pilots to fly. But I would check out somebody in 182 and they couldn't fly 182, and I'd go, how could this guy have a commercial ticket?
Right.
So I went and got my commercial ticket, and I got to tell you, it was the easiest thing I'd ever done in my life. And the first thing I thought when I walked out of there was, who the fuck's been flying my airplanes? So we got a lot more serious about pilot training, and I was really lucky because I had people like Mike Guinness, who was an airline pilot and a long-time jump pilot, and Craig Wolf, who was same situation, except he flies corporate jets. He flies the biggest global expresses there are now for some giant corporation. But those are the guys that were my mentors, and that they were flying my King Airs and checking out our pilots. But so after a year of flying, the first year of flying a King Air, everything's great. People loved it. It was fast as hell. It was fun to fly. But year 2, the hot sections were due. The 5-year items are due. So all the money you think you made the year before,
gone.
You pour right back into it to keep the airplane alive. And so after a few years of flying King Airs, it was like, it's a money pit.
Sure.
And so the bane of our industry has been poorly trained pilots and poorly maintained airplanes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I wanted out from under that. And those 2 items, as we have learned over the years, is a deadly combination in King Air B90s or King Air 90s.
Damn right.
So, our King Air, we flew it for several years, and then all the items were due again. The airplane probably wasn't worth $100,000 in the condition it was in. We put it on, literally stuck it on a set of hay bales, and parted it out and made $180,000 off of it the first summer.
Oh, wow.
So everybody flying King Airs, part them out, get out from under them.
Yep.
That's the best thing you can do. So anyway, the A&P Phil Esdale at Davis Air Repair that did all the maintenance on our aircraft, him and I were always talking about a better platform for skydiving. We need a better airplane. But he was a Kiwi, and he knew about the Cresco, which is a crop dusting airplane in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It had a 6-34 in the front of it. Well, down in New Zealand, they were taking the hopper out of this crop dusting airplane because then the Cresco had the hopper behind the pilot, where all the ag planes in the United States, the hopper's up in front.
Sure.
They were pulling the hopper out of this airplane and putting 8 jumpers in it and using it for skydiving. And so we talked about making a larger version of that airplane, and we put together the numbers. We did some market research that summer. We came up with how many turbine airplanes were being flown in the United States, approximately how many hours were being flown, how many number of jumps. So we put together a whole thing of all the airplanes being used for skydiving and then focused on the turbines. We took the market research. We went to New Zealand. We're just a couple of, yahoos.
Right.
But we managed to get an audience with the president of the company, of Pacific Aerospace. And we did our spiel, and we sold them on the idea. We said, listen, if you build a large version of this airplane and build it specifically for the skydiving industry, and at that time the skydiving industry had exploded in New Zealand, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
The tandem thing was incredible. It was gigantic.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, the skydiving thing is so successful in New Zealand, their centennial $10 bill has a little tandem on the top corner of the bill.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's very cool. So anyway, we convinced them. This was in 2000, the year 2000. That was the same year I bought my first caravan. So I got out from under the King Airs and was running caravans. And so we convinced them this is a project worth doing, because if you build this airplane that we want, you'll also have a really good utility aircraft.
For sure.
So they signed off on the idea. We made a deal. We came home. We started Utility Aircraft Corporation, and that's how it got started. And what's kind of amazing is that we went from idea to a certified airplane in 4 years.
Which is crazy.
It's amazing. No one can anywhere near that these days.
No.
Hell, it takes them 4 years just to get it down on paper.
Right.
So in 2014, we brought the first caravan over.
Wow.
I'm sorry. I'm the first pack,
Sure,
P750XL.
sure.
And that's how it all started. So it's an amazing airplane, but folks like me, middle-aged to old-age, fat relative workers, don't think it's the best airplane in the world.
It's right. I'll tell you what, it's hands down, in my opinion, it's the best tandem aircraft on the planet. I don't think, at least coming from a pilot's perspective, I don't think there's an easier plane to load, and I don't think as a tandem instructor there's an easier plane to hook up and exit out of than the Pack. It was just a wonderful aircraft. Funny thing is, the first time I ever saw it, I saw a picture of your bird. It was a 750DZ with that crazy paint job, and I saw a picture of it in Parachutist magazine before I was flying anything like it, and I went, that's the ugliest fucking thing I've ever seen. And then I came out and started working for you and started flying it and went, that's the most beautiful aircraft I've ever laid my eyes on.
Yeah, I wanted the airplane to be loud and stand up.
Oh, it did.
Stand out. I wanted to make sure that everybody that saw it or everybody that was around saw it and it got their attention. And that was the idea before. And people either loved that paint job or they hated it. I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was awesome.
No, so did I. I spent enough time waxing that damn thing. I fell in love with it. That's for damn sure.
So we took delivery of it in 2014. And, the tragic story, which I'll glaze over real quickly, was the first one didn't make it across the Pacific.
Yeah, it's still sitting about 100 miles off the coast, isn't it?
Oh, it's drifted out somewhere. Who knows where it's at now? It was about 250 miles short.
Oh.
But it's a really tragic story. But the ferry pilot just screwed the pooch. He didn't monitor his fuel burn. Turns out he didn't have his fuel caps on properly, and he was venting fuel overboard all night long. So he came up with 3 hours worth of fuel for a 5-hour flight. So that's the reason. It was not the airplane. It was a real kick in the teeth for us. First airplane coming over, but we had ferried one over before. The prototype we'd ferried over and done testing at the National Test Center up in Mojave. Did all the spin tests and all the other stuff, and then ferried it back to New Zealand.
Wow.
So it was tanked up properly, had the right kind of fuel in it, and made it no problem. So after that, I ferried several of them over myself. And Hawaii to United States is the longest leg over water in the world.
Yeah.
And so in the pack, it was a 14.5-hour flight. We took off with 18 hours of fuel on board.
Man.
But anyway, it went down because of pilot error, which is a tragic thing. But so then that was the day after Christmas was when I was supposed to be taking delivery of the airplane.
Oh, man.
So kind of ruined my Christmas.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, luckily, the second one made it out there, and it
Second one made it, and we got it there. We got it there a week before the World Free Fall Convention.
Awesome.
So we made one jump out of our skydiving center, just because we had to do all the certification stuff and get it off the NC register and FAA register and blah blah blah. But we made one skydive at our drop zone out of it, so we could say we made the first jump in the United States with it, and then I ferried it to the World Free Fall Convention, and it was so new it still had bubble wrap on the handrails.
That's awesome.
And so there we are at the Free Fall Convention. We're there trying to convince people to jump out of our little airplane when there's CASAs and sky vans and everything else along on the flight line. But ours was a brand new airplane, and people wanted to jump out of brand new airplanes.
Sure.
The first brand new airplane ever designed and built for skydiving.
Yep.
And only the second new airplane in the United States that ever been bought brand new for skydiving.
Sure.
The first one was Cowboys Caravan some years before.
Yep.
Anyway, the weather turned bad. There was a 4,000-foot cloud layer that just hung there. And there were, 2,000 people there with money in their pockets, jump tickets in their hands, wanting to meet skydives.
Sure. So
we said, 2 skydives for the price of 1, Hoppin' Pops. And we fired up our pack, and we flew. The first day we flew 43 loads.
That's awesome.
Because as you know how that airplane is on takeoff.
Oh yeah.
From takeoff, jump run was about a minute and a half, and it was about 30 seconds to land. So we were just cranking and turning and cranking and turning. And my guys that were doing the manifest, they said, we've only got 3 people. I said, send them out. Send them out. It didn't matter how many we had. We were just shooting straight up in the sky, dropping jumpers, and shooting straight back down. Yep. 43 loads. At the end of the day, I did the math, and it's like, man, I hope it's cloudy the rest of the week.
Hey, keep that shit rolling. Hell yeah.
So we did that for 2 days. We did 43 loads the first day, I think it was, and 39 the next day, and then the skies finally cleared.
Wow.
But the other operators couldn't stand it. They wanted to get in on what I was doing. So Mike Mullins fired up his King Air and offered Hoppin' Pops for the same price.
Sure.
But he wouldn't fly with just 2 or 3 people.
And that's where you had
I was flying with as many as 15 and as few as 3.
Sure.
And so he'd fly a couple of loads and then shut down. And then Paul Ferry fired up his CASA for high-speed flybys. So people got in the CASA running off the tailgate doing 130 knots. And but they just couldn't keep it going.
Sure.
And I could. So it was pretty amazing. So it was grand fun. It was a great introduction of the airplane to the United States.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, and then it's obviously become quite the success both in the U.S. and around the world. I mean, PAC 750s can be found everywhere. In fact, a very good mutual friend of ours is running one out of Pretoria, South Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Yep.
they're everywhere
And,
now. You got to have a shitload of pride in that. I mean, between you and Phil, you guys just decided we need a new kind of fucking airplane, and now it's one of the most prevalent skydiving aircraft on the planet.
Well, yeah, and it can't be beat for efficiency, safety, and profitability as a jump plane. It can't be beat.
Well, and I personally don't think it can be beat, especially considering it was my first turbine. I went from a 182 at your drop zone, and by the way, thanks again for giving me the job. straight into the PAC 750 at 1,000 hours, and it's I'll say it now. But between you and the PAC 750, the only reason I'm the fucking pilot instead of just a fucking asshole is because I got that job to fly that plane.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Man. That plane was an incredible introduction to a turbine. As far as a turbine aircraft goes, they don't get any more user-friendly and simple. It's a stick, so it's fucking fun to fly. The thing, climbs like a bat out of hell when it's moderately loaded and descends. The only way you could make that thing come down faster is if you folded the wings back.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's right.
I mean, it just drops out of the sky. It's just a fantastic plane. And so especially for somebody like me who had that as his first turbine, I mean, wow, what a plane.
Yeah, and in those days, the other thing the beauty of the airplane that we figured out once we were operating it was, I had a 182, so we'd have one or two tandems. We'd fire up the 182 with two tandems and spend 45 minutes getting altitude.
Right.
Or flying to load. And in the PAC with two tandems, we could fly to load to 13,000 feet and be back on the ground in less than 10 minutes or 10 minutes most.
I don't know how many.
So,
I can't even count how many times on your load sheets that I would actually end up putting a 0.1 for flight time because it was just prior to clicking over to a 0.2. That's fucking fast.
And it was cheaper to fly there. And at the end of the first year, I did the math on what it cost me to operate that 182 that year because we weren't using it very much. And by the time you paid for the maintenance and insurance, the average cost per jump out of the 182 was like $25. So it's like we got rid of the 182 and we just flew the PAC. And the other great thing about having the PAC there was all the jumpers in Northern California knew that the turbine would be flying every day.
Yeah.
They didn't have to worry about jumping out of a 182.
Yeah.
And it was just that was another bonus to the airplane we hadn't even considered.
Oh yeah.
But back then, in the early days of free flying, hell, and if you saw each other in free fall on your head, you were doing good. So they weren't trying to do mass exits like they're doing 100 ways now in free flying. It's incredible.
Sure.
But back then, free flyers had loved the airplane because they knew it was going to fly and they knew it was fast.
Sure. Yeah.
So but now with the super vans are available, that Texas Turbine Super Van is an amazing conversion.
Sure.
So all of a sudden you could take a Caravan, which was as slow as a 182 when you loaded up full of jumpers. Now you've got a Caravan that flies as fast as the PAC.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing machine.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good aircraft out there now, and I've been lucky to fly a number of different versions of all of them, and it's definitely, you can pretty much pick an aircraft for the type of operation you want to run now, and back then you didn't have those kind of options, so it's super cool. Super cool.
Yeah. So but I had the first Black Hawk in Northern California.
Yep.
The Black Hawk Caravan conversion, and now I have the super vans, and I'll just put it this way: I have super vans now.
Yep, I've been told
Texas super vans.
That's one of them I haven't flown, but I have been told for sure. Now, I got a couple of questions that I want to shoot off that have nothing to do with airplanes. Were you there when Matthews burned his balls?
Oh, on the tower?
Yeah.
No, I actually was not there. As I've told you before, as a DCO, sometimes I left because I had to have plausible deniability.
It's so funny because we talk and you give me the background and your history to everything, and you were a bit of a shit stirrer back in the day, even though you weren't drinking and doing the party stuff. But when you and I got to know each other, you were at least famous in the U.S. as being a bit of a hard-ass DZO. And I don't know if you'll remember this, but I came to interview you. You're the only DZO that actually interviewed me for a job. Usually it was just how many jumps you got. Yeah, you can go. And you wanted to sit down and have an interview. So I walked in and sit down, and you looked at the resume that I had to write up for you. and you saw that I used to work for Michael Hawks. And you asked me, and I'm sure you remember this, you asked me, oh, you worked for Michael Hawks for 2.5 years, so you know how to work for a hard ass. And I don't, and I
do remember that.
Oh yeah, and I gambled because I'm like, all right, I've heard stories about Ray. I heard he's a tough son of a bitch, so I'm gonna have to either handle him with kid gloves or I'm just gonna have to go for it. And I decided to go for it, and I looked you in the eyes and I said, if you're twice the prick people say you are, you're still only half the prick he is. And you looked at me for a solid 5 or 6 seconds, started laughing, shook my hand, and said, "You're hired." And I went, yep.
I do remember that.
Yep,
I do remember that.
Yep. And it was really the only way I could think of to do it. Because, again, you had that reputation of being, nope, it's going to be Ray's way or you're fucking done. So I'm like, all right, well, I better figure it out now. And then the first business meeting that we had with all the staff, you started listing all the rules for the drop zone. And what was the rule about dating? Was it number 5? You weren't,
rule number 5.
Rule number 5, you're not allowed to date the staff, and me, not knowing when to keep my fucking mouth shut, raises my hand.
No. Wait a minute. You got it wrong. Not. You could date staff. You weren't allowed to extend your relationship beyond that of a professional skydiving instructor with your students.
With the students, right. And so me being a smart ass, in the middle of the meeting, I hold up my hand and go, does sex count as dating?
Yeah.
Again, another good one. And it was funny because the thing that I always knew with you was you might look like you were pissed off, but you could see just that little bit of a twinkle going, all right, that was good, but shut the fuck up. You could see it more times than I can count. But a lot of shenanigans went on at that drop zone, especially because of the double wide trailer. And for those that have never been to Skydance had the main offices and the drop zone and manifest and the hangar and all that stuff where all the activities were on. But midfield, you had Action Air Parachutes, which is where the loft was. And then you had a double wide trailer that you rented out to the responsible jumpers on the drop zone.
Or irresponsible jumpers on the drop zone.
Man, some stuff went on in that place.
It was Action Air was at the drop zone, but Flight Suit Company was midfield.
That's right.
That was next to the double wide.
That's right. Man, some silliness got on down there for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and remember, I lived in the double wide for I think 4 years before, and you got there when Jim was there.
Yep.
So it had been kind of party central for a number of years.
Yeah. Jim was living there when I started jumping there, and then of course when I brought the Chicagoland Otter out for winters, I spent a few months living in the double wide there and got firsthand experience of what it's like living in that place. That was pretty interesting as well. I mean, yeah, some of the craziness that happened was pretty entertaining. Or like. And I brought this up, I think, talking to Jim or somebody else from Skydance. Do you remember the guy that decided to taxi the airplane down the runway when it didn't have wings on it?
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck happened with that?
He was just going to do a ground taxi, a taxi test, a high-speed taxi test.
With no wings.
And with no wings, and it didn't work out so well. Without a rudder working along with the wings, it was all vector, no control. I mean, all thrust, no vector.
Oh my God. I remember because I was on descent when that happened and I watched it happen and I had to radio to manifest going, pretty sure a plane with no wings just crashed on the runway. and had to go a little long to land past him and all. Oh man. So out of all that time at Skydance, you guys were operating for all the way up until 2017. What was some of the best memories you've got of that place? What are some of the worst memories of that place? I mean, it was an epic drop zone for quite a while. Still is.
Oh yeah. Well, the Olympic skydiving team was an amazing event, and for me, it was incredible just to be a small part of it. And so that was great fun. Going to Korea was my first trip out of the country. So except for I had made it to Canada once. So, but no, that was one of the great events. Having all the teams from around the world training there one summer was epic. It was just incredible fun stuff going on. And then Mike Mitchell started with us started the American Boogie.
Yep.
And so every American Boogie for the first 5 years were epic.
Oh yeah.
You know, we did we lit the field up with the lights that they use for nighttime farming. So we had the whole field lit up like a stadium, and we made night jumps basically all night long.
Yep.
And that was pretty amazing.
I flew one of those nights.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Oh yeah.
So just so many great memories. All the world records we did, especially with the Halo stuff. We had the only skydiving center in the United States that could fly 30,000 feet because I had done the work, and we had the RVSM, which means RVSM equipped airplanes, as you know.
Sure.
You got to be RVSM approved to fly above 28,000 feet.
Yep.
So we were the only people that had ever gotten an exemption for that, or the waiver, because basically, if you want to do battle with the FAA or do business with the FAA, you just got to know the regs. Because if you know the regs, you know more than they do.
Sure.
So, I filled out all the documentation. I went to the FAA. I said, well, I want to get an RVSM waiver. You can't do it. I said, yes, you can. Here's the regs, and here's how it works. So here's how we're going to do it. So basically, I taught them how to do it, and they agreed to it. And so we were doing 30,000-foot jumps. Then we were doing world record altitude jumps, and we had my super van to 37,500 feet.
Jesus Christ!
So, and that's pretty much the ultimate, the max altitude limitation, because you know the old triangle. The triangle is stall speed versus climb speed.
Right.
And at a certain altitude, that becomes a point.
Right.
So I used to call it flying on the knife edge. You lure it on a coordinate, you start sliding down the side of it. So, but yeah, we did some pretty great things. For about 10 years, we set almost every wingsuit record there was.
Sure.
Every one of those flights were epic to me because it was just incredible stuff.
Oh yeah, so, no, and I was lucky enough to, during my tenure there as well, to fly a lot of the some of the high altitude stuff and a lot of the events, and I mean, you got a whole bunch of cool stuff that happened out there. In fact, do you remember Mythbusters when they came out? That was fantastic.
Oh yeah, that was a great time.
Oh, it was.
The Mythbusters, those guys were so much fun to work with. Half their crew wound up doing tandem jumps with us.
Yep, I took them.
Yeah, that's right. We wound up doing 3 different episodes with the Mythbusters.
Oh, that's cool. I did the one. I did the one to do the Point Break miss. Actually, you know, it's kind of funny because I've got a bone to pick with you on that. So we did the whole thing. We were sitting stuck in fucking weather for the longest time, and they wanted to do 3 jumps. They wanted to do the can you fall for 90 seconds from 4,000 feet. To bust that myth, we just threw the dummy Buster out of the plane with nothing and let him go in. Twice, yeah. Obviously, we busted that myth as he plowed into the field across from the drop zone. Then we wanted to do, could you talk in free fall? So I took the tandem, and camera flyer tandem instructor Dan jumped out and tried to verbally pass a message to my student. And then
do you remember what the message was?
Oh, what was it? I don't offhand.
I do. The message was, pull my finger and you'll hear a tuba.
Oh, that's right. And it was. I think it was Grant Imahara, the Asian gentleman I took. He was the one to do that one. And then what was his name? Tori Bellaccio.
Right.
I took him to see if you could jump out of an airplane 15 seconds after somebody else and catch them. And they kind of confirmed that one because Nick, who did the jump, caught up to us just at pull time.
That's right.
Which was super cool. But the bone that I had to pick with you was after it was all said and done. We're finished. The day's done. We got the jumps in that we didn't think we were going to do, and everybody ends up over at Doc's place drinking at the trailer on the drop zone.
Yeah.
So we're having our drinks and everything, and Carrie Byron, the female Mythbuster, was there,
the redhead,
just looking adorable.
Yeah.
And I was flirting up a storm, and she was flirting back. We were taking pictures and all that, and you son of a bitch made me fucking fly the pack to Davis right then. You came to me and you're like, Dean, pack's got to go over to air repair. What?
Yeah. And I did you a favor because the reason I don't know if you even know this, but the reason she didn't jump when everybody else did
Yeah.
is because she was
pregnant. Yeah, I didn't care.
And she was married, and so I saved you from yourself.
She wasn't even engaged quite yet. I did find out she was pregnant after the fact, but oh my God. I got in that pack, came close to busting every limit that damn aircraft had to get it to the damn shop as quick as I possibly could, cussing your fucking name every second of the way. That motherfucking son of a bitch. And then got there, of course, nobody's there. So now I'm like, oh, he told me Phil was going to be, and finally I get a ride back. And of course, by the time I get back to the drop zone, it's crickets. Literally everybody's gone. Oh man, I cussed you out for about a month. Like that son of a bitch. And I think we ended up, they had left Buster at the drop zone after he went in, and there's a picture of me having my way with Buster because I figured it was the only Mythbuster I was going to get close to after that.
Well, that was there was always a method to my madness.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was the thing, is everybody always pretty much figured you knew what was going on, but it didn't necessarily mean they liked it all that much.
Well, you might remember one of the rules I had was you can say anything you want to another staff member or to management or to me, but you had to do it behind closed doors. Yep. I didn't allow people to air their laundry in the public.
Yep.
So, I had I nicely asked people to come see me in my office on a regular occasion.
Yep. Oh yeah, well, you got me a couple times. There was one time that a camera flyer, Amy, who I'm sure you remember, who worked for the FAA, had left a CD for me on my desk in the office in the hangar that had the caption "Dean's Mad Flying Skills," and it was a series of pictures of me, beautiful exits out of the pack and all that stuff, and maybe a little bit over the top, just a little bit. And you call me, into the office, and you sit down for a second, and I sit down, and you turn your computer around, and it's nothing but pictures of me at a slightly steeper bank angle, or slightly more aggressive descent.
Yeah, slightly.
Slightly, just a little bit. And you looked at me, and you went, "You got the pictures?" And I'm like, yeah. You need to do that again? No. Cool. You popped the disc out and handed it to me and said, "Have a nice day." I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. Well, and then towards the end, and this is actually where I got to give you a ton of credit. Right when I had decided I was going to go fly the Otter in Chicago, I don't know if you didn't want me going or you were mad at the guy that offered me the job or whatever, but you were mad at me for about a week or so and giving me shit for, you kept calling me a short timer and telling me I was lazy. And I knew I wasn't, but it was pissing me off something fierce. And so I finally stormed into your office and closed the door, and I said, "God damn it, Ray, I've been busting my ass for this long and doing this, that, and the other thing, and always making sure I do my job, so stop fucking saying I'm lazy." And you looked at me and went, "I'm sorry about that. You're right. Have a good day." And I was blown away because I expected you to put up a fight and throw me the fuck out. And you just went, "Yeah, no, you're right." And I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
I got to tell the story that you didn't tell in your book.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the last day you flew for me.
Oh God.
We had goaded you into okay, princess, it's your last day. You have to fly in a dress. So you showed up in a skirt, nice little white skirt,
yep.
And you spent the day flying in the skirt. And a good friend of mine named Rich, who worked for the FAA, and he was a check airman in just about every kind of airplane in the world, from DC-3s to helicopters and everything in between. And he landed to get fuel at our place, and he was flying a King Air 200. And I go, "Rich, what are you doing this afternoon?" He says, "I don't got nothing." And I said, "Here's what's going on. You got to come back here today because I need to bust my pilot's chops." And so he said, "Okay." So he comes back. He takes the King Air back over to Sacramento. He comes back over, and I get on the radio. And I go, "Dean, I'm taking over the next load. The FA's here, and they want to talk to you." And he goes, "You go, well, what'd I do?" And I go, "I don't know, but they're fucking pissed." And so I meet you at the airplane, and you jump out, and you're going, what did I do? What did I do? I said, man, I don't know, but you better fix it because this is fucked up. And I hop in the airplane. You go running through the parking lot to grab your wallet that's in your car, not on your person because you're wearing a skirt. And then you go in the office, and he starts looking at your wallet or at your pilot's license and goes, let me see the medical, looks at your medical, and you were sitting there just in a tissue wearing a skirt.
Yep, wondering what the fuck I'd done wrong. You guys left me hanging on that for a while too.
Yeah, and then but in the end, he was I forget exactly what happened because I was flying, but before it was over with, Rich started breaking out into a grin, looking down at the ground because he was about to bust out laughing
Couldn't handle
himself
it anymore.
And so the joke was over. But you were shitting bricks.
Oh, you damn right I was. Well, and that whole damn day was tough too, because you're right. I showed up in that extremely comfortable, by the way, for those pilots listening. Fly in a skirt sometime. It's fucking amazing, especially in the summer. But if you remember, about halfway through that day, we got a flat fucking tire. So I ended up.
Oh, that's right.
I had to change the tire in a skirt. So I had the huge crowd around taking pictures as I'm squatting down under the pack, changing the tire in a skirt, which was another just ridiculous part of it.
Well, the reality is that in the early days of Skydance, I'm glad GoPros weren't around.
Right? Oh, man. I'll tell you what, had social media and camera phones and all that shit been around with this kind of prevalence back then, we'd all be screwed.
Yeah, social media and GoPros kind of ruined the party.
Oh, yeah. No, now you always got to look over your shoulder to see who the hell's filming because you never know what's coming.
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know we've got about 1 billion different stories that we can continue to go through, and I'm going to tell you right now and say it flat out, I want to make sure I get you back on here because there's so much more we can talk about and so many gritty details I want to get into on Skydance and everything, but we're going to call it quits on this one and definitely leave it on a high note. But I want you to give some advice to anybody out there thinking of doing something silly like running a DZ. And anybody that's thinking about getting into skydiving and all that stuff 30 years down the road, what advice do you got to give to those people?
Everybody ought to give skydiving a try. I don't care how many hours you fly in a tunnel. It's not the same as being in free fall.
No, it is not.
It's been the most amazing trip in the world for me. Like I say in my little byline, is you got to be where you've been to be where you are. If you like where you are, it's been a good trip.
Damn right.
So I've had a grand trip. The skydiving industry and the skydiving community is the best in the world. I just can't say enough about it. It's just awesome. Everybody needs to give it a try. If you want to run a skydiving center, get your ducks in a row, put together a little bit of a business plan, which I had never done before in my life, and convince an airport that you're an asset and they want you to be there. Otherwise, you'll spend 10 years fighting the battle.
Sure. Well, I know that I just interviewed Billy and Angie Sharman not that long ago, and Billy was actually just out near me not that long ago, and he said nothing but praise to you and all the things that you've done trying to help him in getting it up and running, because I don't think anybody's really prepared for what's coming at them when they take on, being the adult in the room when it comes to a bunch of skydivers.
Yeah, that's a fact, and certainly, as you know, I watched Billy grow up for sure.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. Yeah, from all the silliness that he did to getting tossed off the drop zone to now running his own operation where they're getting ready to have national championships and all this stuff. It's pretty fantastic, and it's
pretty great. Pretty
it
great.
really is, and it's hats off to guys like you that have done it when it was a lot harder to do, because we've gotten to learn from all the hard fought lessons that you had to learn, and it gets a little bit easier because. Looking back, especially, when you're in the middle of it all, you can't figure out why the DZO is always pissed off and ornery and this and that. And now I look at the DZOs and go, how the fuck is that guy smiling? I'd kill somebody.
Yeah.
So I think it takes a special kind of psychotic son of a bitch to want to run a drop zone. And man, you ran one for a long time and did it quite well.
Well, and the other thing you want to keep in mind is that If you run at EZO, don't take anything personal, because if you do, you'll hate everyone.
Yep.
But no, it's been a grand run. I can't complain. Life is good, and I don't think I'd change much of anything. It's been a great run.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean,
and it's been great fun catching up with you. I'd love to do it again.
Oh, we're definitely going to do it again, because there's just too damn many stories that I know we haven't touched on. Like I said it before, and I'll say it again. The fact of the matter is, you put me in a plane. Literally, as soon as I had my commercial license, you had me in your 182. As soon as I hit 1,000 hours, I was flying a turbine, and none of the stuff that I've been able to do in the quite a few years since then would have happened had you not given me the opportunity. And if I haven't said thank you before, I'm going to say it now, Ray. It's been an amazing ride, and I can thank you for it.
I'm proud to see what you've done with it as well. It's been pretty awesome.
Oh, Ray, so good catching up with you, man. I'm real thankful you took the time, and I hope everybody learned some good lessons, and we'll do it again soon.
Sounds great.
All right, Ray, thank you so much. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Lunatic Fringe podcast, brought to you as always by, well, wait, not as always, actually. Brought to you now by Gyro. Formerly known as NZ Aerosports, you'll head to gyro.com for their next level line of canopies. By Pussfoot, the Extreme Sports Collective. Head over to pussfoot.com to check it out. By Summit Parachute Systems, check out summitparachutesystems.com to talk to Jarrett Martin and the gang about kick-ass pilot rigs, rigging courses, and more. By Flyaway Indoor Skydiving, go to flyawaytn.com and check out all the cutting-edge stuff to come. By Pure Spectrum CBD, head to purespectrumcbd.com to check out their wide range of CBD products. And as for us, head to the lunaticfringepodcast.com to listen to any of the hundreds of episodes currently available, hit the link for our YouTube channel, pick up your copy of the Lunatic Fringe book or The Accidental Stripper, and get a sneak peek at upcoming guests. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.